What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Finance with Parks. So I'm assuming we got a lot of Shark Tank fans out there. In today's video, I thought it would be beneficial to talk through some of the basic business fundamentals and how Shark Tank works. Let's roll the clip for how every pitch in Shark Tank begins.
Hi Sharks, my name is Dave Basson. I'm the founder and CEO of Brightville, and I'm here seeking a $400,000 investment for a 4% equity stake in my company.
Every episode starts out the same way, right? I am here asking for $250,000 in exchange for 25% of my company. But what does that really mean and what does it stand for? Also, how does that translate into the total valuation of the company? So first off, let's establish why people come to Shark Tank. In startup businesses, cash is so important. It is by far one of the most important financial metrics when you're starting a business because you need it for so many things, right? Whether that's buying product, paying your employees, purchasing new offices, buildings. Almost every company at the beginning needs cash to get started, and so there are really two options for businesses to raise that money. So in theory, the best way to raise cash for a new company would be to either have that in your bank account or to borrow it from friends and family members. However, if you don't have that option, then you run into two main choices. The first would be to go to a bank and take out a loan like you would with a car or a house. The bank would loan you the money, you wouldn't have to give up any equity stake in your company, and they could give you the $250,000. They will charge you interest to borrow that money, however. And interest rates on business loans are normally much higher than what you would see in a car or a home loan. Option two is where Shark Tank comes into play. So the Sharks would give that $250,000, but in exchange take a percentage ownership of the company. That has pros, however, though, because now you're not only just getting the cash from the Sharks, but they have a vested interest in helping out the success of your company because they're a part owner as well. If you get 25% of a vested interest from Mark Cuban, for example, and he's a part owner, being able to ask Mark Cuban business advice is a huge pro. I mean, not only do you get to use the cash, but to be able to lean on his expertise, that value is probably just as equal to the $250,000 you got in cash. So if you go to get a loan, for example, yeah, the bank's giving you the money, but you're getting no added advice in return. Now, as far as percentages go on Shark Tank, you hear Mark Cuban say often that that's not enough skin in the game. What he's referring to, and you'll see most deals on Shark Tank don't settle for less than 10% stake in the company. They also want to have enough percentage ownership to make their time worth it. For anybody who owns 5% in a company, for these billionaire investors that have a ton of other priorities, 5% just really isn't enough of a motivation to get them to assist the business. Now, if you're talking 25 to 30% ownership of the company, now that means something to them. All right, so now how does the $250,000 at 25% translate into the total valuation of the business? First, let's step back and think about how this scenario would be different if I was just buying out your company entirely. It would be the same terms, it's just normally not said in this fashion. Essentially, I would be saying, I want 100% ownership in your company for $1 million. Now, that is the same valuation as our example of $250,000 for 25%. The way to think about that, right, is that if $1 million equals 100%, then $750,000 equals 75%, $500,000 equals 50%, $250,000 equals 25%. It's just carrying across ratios. As the ownership in the business goes up, so should the amount of cash that you're offering. Now, unfortunately, not all the examples are that easy from a math perspective, but the way I do it, and you do need a calculator for this sometimes depending on how nicely the math works out, is I take 100 or 100% ownership of the business, divide it by the percentage that's being offered. So in this case, it would be 25%, gets you the multiple of 4, or 4 other stakes of 25% would equal, the 100% ownership. Take that multiplier of 4, multiply it by the cash that's being offered, 4 times 250,000 equals $1 million. Take another example for the same valuation. What if they offered 10% of my company for $100,000? The math still works the same way. Take 100, divide it by 10, or the 10%, you get a multiplier of 10. 10 times $100,000 is $1 million. So now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, well, if the valuation of the company is still the same, how do I decide between 25% ownership of my company for $250K versus 50% ownership for $500K? It's still the same total valuation. However, you're getting a lot more cash, in turn though giving up more percent stake in your company. It comes down to one simple thing. How badly do you need the cash? If it is a startup and you have worked your behind off to get this company off the ground, and now all of a sudden you are so desperate for cash that you're going to give up 50% of the company, that's really an unfortunate place to be in. If you're in a scenario where you need the $500 or the $500,000 or you're not going to make payroll the next month, then you're unfortunately going to be a little more motivated to give up that stake in the business. However, if you have sound fundamentals and you only need $250,000, let's say, to get started, it would be way more beneficial to only give up 25% of the company right now. Keep in mind that just because you go to raise money one time, you still own 75% of the company. So if down the road, let's say 2 years later, you have to go and raise more money and give up ownership of your company again in the same type of format, you still hold on to 75% of the ownership, so you have some wiggle room to be able to give up more equity in order to raise more cash. Also, the hope would be that 2 years later, after that $250,000 is used to buy product, buy down your cost, your valuation of the company could go from $1 million to $5 million next time you raise money down the road. So going back to the show for a second, after you see the company owners pitch their, whatever their offer is, the whole rest of the 5 to 10 minutes of asking questions, talking about the business model, it's all related to the sharks trying to figure out if that valuation makes sense. If the money that you're asking for, and in turn what you're valuing your total business at, ties out to the success of your business. That's why they ask about things like sales, revenue. Sales and revenue are the same thing. Profit margins. All of those questions are trying to help the sharks decide whether your number valuation makes sense. Now, I'm going to do a whole nother video that talks about that second half of the show, because there's things like multiples you could talk about. Like I heard, for example, Kevin O'Leary say on a show, you're asking me to pay 16 times sales. How do all those ratios work? How are they used to value a business? Things like that. So that'll be on another episode. But once you get the valuation part locked down and you understand what they're valuing their total company at, the rest of the episode just falls in line with trying to figure out if that makes sense. So if you enjoyed the content today, if you could like and subscribe, that would be awesome. We're posting videos every Sunday and Tuesday with a focus on personal finance and business understanding for the everyday person. We appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you again soon.